Hey folks, welcome to the Inside Line F1 podcast. And this is a special winter episode where we have it on video as well on Pitch to Podium, luckily. And over here, it's the off season. Usually we tend to get a lot bored, but we've got a really special guest here with us who's been the voice of Formula One in Norway all the way back since 1997. So a lot of fun stories are coming up right here. But to introduce myself, my name is Samal Arora. I'm the host of The Driving Force on Disney Plus Hotstar, and as always, I've got Kunal Shah here with me, the former marketing head of the Force India F1 team. And Kunal, this is fun, right? That in the off season, we can experiment and we can get folks like our guest here today to really just add some spice to the winter and have so many fun stories to discuss.
Absolutely, Samuel. Thank you very much for that. And, I'm going to take a cue from what you just said. You said winter of the Formula One break, and literally joining us from the northernmost part that I've ever lived in the world, from the city of Oslo, is somebody who I know as one of the most experienced commentators in the world of Formula One. And, when I was writing down his, and I'm still going to say his because I haven't introduced him. Mm-hmm. When I was writing down his introduction, I realized that above all else, he's a great friend. He's a great motorsport sounding board. I've discussed some fantastic content lines, driver rivalries, politics, and several other, things that people have seen, millions have seen on television as well. But yes, so it's my pleasure to introduce Atle Gulbrandsen, who's a friend, who's a colleague, who is a fantastic motorsporting brain, who I've had the pleasure to work with for almost, I think, 4 seasons now for the NENT network in Norway. Atle, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to our show.
Thank you, and thank you for the nice words, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And when I was thinking up this episode, I said, okay, it's like thinking of making the present of motorsport broadcast, the present of the motorsport broadcast world meet with the future of the motorsport broadcast world. So for me, it's a pleasure to have you as well as Somil, two commentating legends, one in the paddock and the real world of Formula One, and of course Somil doing fantastic work in the iRacing network as well. So for me, it's a joy to just sit with both of you and talk shop, if that's the word.
No, exactly. Should be a lot of fun. But Atle, first things first, we have to tell our listeners and our viewers that you've been commentating on Formula One all the way back since even before the start of the millennium, essentially. I'm making it sound like you're very old, but it just comes across as very fresh, especially, folks, if you've checked out that audio clip of the Abu Dhabi GP. And it's interesting, Atle. I was just searching along on YouTube last week, and I was thinking, yeah, it'll be fun to scroll through some Formula One videos. And there's an amazing clip of you commentating on that final lap of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. And I was like, wow, this is just some superb stuff. Although I can't understand exactly everything that's being said, just the excitement comes across, and you've been doing this for so many years now. So how did it actually even begin? Because you used to be a racing driver previously.
Yeah, that's correct. This is a long story, but I can try to make it short. As you also know, my English is not my native language, but I will try my best. I started with karting, as so many others, when I was 12 years old at the time. And probably I was dreaming about being a Formula One driver, as most karting drivers do. But also, like most karting drivers, I ran out of money. So I did some karting, I did some racing. I still do some racing because I started again. But at the time when I was 16, my family, we simply ran out of money for racing. So I still wanted to be involved in motorsports somehow. And I found an interest of journalism. So I started writing for a motorsport magazine and wrote about Formula One, because I was like a Formula One, Formula One nerd. I watched everything. I was up 2 o'clock in the morning to watch the free practice from Suzuka, for example. So I started to write some articles about Formula One. And then one day I heard that a TV channel called Canal Plus was going to broadcast Formula One in Norway. And then I was thinking maybe I should try to become one of the commentators. But at the time I was 17 years old and I even didn't have my driver's license. So maybe the chances wasn't that good, but I could try anyway. So I made this, call it a secret plan. I called the boss of this TV channel because I was going to interview him for the magazine that I wrote for about Formula One. And one of the questions that I had was who is going to commentate the races? And he said that they had a couple of race car drivers who were going to commentate, but they were also busy racing, so they couldn't do all the races. So then I said, this is not what why I'm calling, but maybe I can suggest myself. And to be honest, today, 25 years later, that was a lie. That was exactly why I was calling. Yeah, this boss, he was a really cool guy. So he thought that yeah, why not? You're 17 years old, you're young, but maybe we can give you a chance. And just a couple of weeks later, I remember he called me and he asked if I could do the Monaco Grand Prix. The studio that time was in Stockholm, in Sweden. So I flew to Stockholm. I was so nervous. I didn't sleep 1 second that night, I can remember. And I did the Monaco Grand Prix 1997 as my first race ever. And at the time, I was 17 years old.
Wow.
And I think I'm probably the youngest Formula One commentator ever. And I have been commentating Formula One since, every year. So I have now done 25 seasons as a Formula One commentator.
25. That's absolutely crazy. And there's so many more memories that have come that way. But the funny part is, we always just tend to quite ignore the whole thing about how the broadcast comes about. But this is one thing I actually want to bring out, because the two of you actually who come together and put forward the broadcast here in Norway, we've luckily got both of you here together. So Atle, I'll start with you on this one. Just what exactly goes in to preparing for this, and what exactly is the process of bringing it on the NENT network in Norway that happens every single year now?
Oh, it's a big process, and we are, of course, a lot of people working with this. Even in Norway, which is a quite a small market for Formula One, sort of. But we also now like feels that the big interest of Netflix Drive to Survive, and we have a Norwegian driver, Dennis Hauger, coming up, and so the interest is really growing in Norway. But we are a lot of people. Kunal is one of our key persons for doing the Formula One broadcast. I have of course my co-commentators with me on the broadcast. We have a lot of technical people. So yeah, it's not like one or two persons just sitting talking about Formula One. It's a big operation, even though I guess our operation is one of the smallest of Formula One, probably. Normally, we also go to a few races each year. We don't have the budget to travel to all races, but we go to selected races. But now, because of the pandemic, we haven't been on site on a race since 2019. But let's hope it will be a change of that this year.
Yeah, and how did you guys come to work together, Kunal? Because I suppose there's an interesting story that you had about this as well.
Oh, yes, I did. And I'll be happy to sort of narrate the story. So when I was deciding to take a study break after working for 12 years, I, of course, made a list of things that, few things that I'm good at. And one of them was, motorsport related journalism and anything to do with motorsport, I thought, and when I was researching, I said, okay, there is this gentleman who's, commentating, on Viasat, as the channel was called back then. And I saw the first race broadcast. Of course, I did not understand anything that was being spoken. So I was seeing the broadcast, but I had the F1 commentary in my ears. And I said, gave me the opportunity to collaborate with Atle, and now we've actually seen some of the shortest, most cramped, and the longest of seasons together. So it's been a while now.
Oh, crazy stuff. But now, Atle, I have to talk to you about your racing career as well, because you very briefly mentioned that you used to go karting. And this was, of course, in the whole Scandinavian karting network, right? You've got Norway, Sweden, Finland, and the likes. And it's also the same sort of karting base where we had the likes of Kimi and Mika compete. And it's known to be one of the most competitive in the world. And I just want to know your take on how it actually was at that junior level back in the day. Just how competitive was it? Because it's clearly working. You actually won a Norwegian national championship only a few years ago, so the base is incredibly strong over there.
The level is quite high. I was not at a very high level in karting, I have to admit, but of course the level of the best guys in karting in Scandinavia is very, very high. It's we haven't been as good in Norway. That's not because of talent. The talent is as good in Norway as in Finland or Sweden or Denmark, but the other countries have been a bit better to like promote drivers onwards up to, for example, Formula One. I started with cars quite early when I was 15, and it was also a very high level there. I raced with Matthias Ekström, for example, which you probably know, like a multiple DTM champion and everything else he has achieved. The level is really high in the Scandinavian countries. But for me, I chose to like prioritize the broadcasting and the journalism career. But I also had some ambitions as a race car driver, because it's not easy when you're like 16 years old and have to quit because of money. I guess many people, maybe Kunal also, can relate to that. So I set myself some goals as a race car driver also. And I of course knew that to become a Formula One driver is not possible. I was not good enough either, but it was anyway not possible. But I set I set myself two goals as a race car driver. One was that I wanted to win a title, because, as you know, motorsports it's so expensive. So if you win like European championship title or a Norwegian championship title, it could be maybe as good to win the Norwegian title, but the only difference is the budget, but the level can be quite as good or as good. And I also set myself another goal, and that was to be able to drive on a certain level without having to pay for it, because the big problem for most race car drivers is to finance this and to find the budget, and that was as difficult for me as everyone else. So I had this aim to drive without have to think about money.
Hmm.
So to make it short, I did one season in US in the Skip Barber Championship. That's just a junior championship. I raced with Marco Andretti. He later became an IndyCar driver, and some other good drivers who became professionals, and that went quite well. And then I got an offer to drive for a Norwegian team who is driving the German NLS championship. It's a championship based at the Nürburgring Nordschleife. It's an Audi dealer team. So there I basically reached my first goal to drive for free. This was supposed to be a three-year project, but now we have been driven there for 15 years. So I
Wow.
was very, very lucky. That was a lucky break. So I have now been driving the race series at the Nürburgring for more than 15 years and won a lot of races. And the last years we have driven in the TCR class. And also I did 1 year in a Norwegian championship with the seven, the Lotus 7 lookalikes, which I won. So then I reached my second goal. So yeah, I still have a sort of racing career, and I'm so proud of my racing career because I have been able to be doing this for since 92 basically. But my main focus all these years has been the broadcasting. So that's like that's where I make my living. That's my job, and the racing is sort of a hobby.
Uh, and with a hobby as well, you've achieved so much, which I think is just crazy after winning so many races in the VLN. But let's actually talk about the broadcasting side a little bit more right now, because you mentioned that's the primary focus. And over the years, Atle, you mentioned that you had the chance to go to the tracks many a times, and of course, you've been covering it for, I mean, what, 25 odd years now. So, any particular stories that come to mind? Because, of course, Abu Dhabi was one where you remotely saw the most dramatic finish. But in terms of being out on track, in terms of just particular moments where you get to feel the sport raw, which one has to rank out and stand out the best for you personally?
Yeah, it's one race which stands out.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but before I will tell you what race that was, I
Uh-huh.
have to tell you one more thing. That's correct that we did the Abu Dhabi race from Oslo, like most other broadcasters do these days because of the pandemic. But the day after, the Monday after the Formula One final, I was at the Yas Marina circuit.
Oh.
So that was quite strange because I went down there to see the Formula One test and the Formula Two test with Dennis Hauger. But yeah, I have been to around 60 races on site as a Formula One commentator on site, and it has been many great experiences, but it's one race that really stands out as the that's one of the best Formula One races ever, I have to say. And it was one of the most fun experiences as a Formula One commentator. But I was lucky enough to be in Montreal for the Canadian Grand Prix in 2011.
Oh my.
Which was a classic Formula One race, which was red flagged, and it was rain. It lasted for hours after hours. It was like the Spa this year, sort of. But the races compared to Spa, which didn't start, these races started again, and Jenson Button, he was. It was this fight with Jenson Button and Sebastian Vettel, and Jenson Button, he was at one point at the rear, and he won the race. And it was a great experience to be in Montreal that weekend and to really experience this race.
And it's tremendous that that year in general turned out to be the most boring one, but this particular race stood out so much. And in terms of other things as well, does it just get a bit too detached doing it virtually via the studio? I mean, we certainly saw that the excitement just tends to be there, but what element do you feel that is just a little bit extra when you go to the circuit? Do you think it just adds more value to the broadcast as such?
Yeah, of course, it's adds a lot of value, because we have much more information. We can talk to people. We will know things that you can't read on the internet. And you also, it's it gives you a bit more excitement to be there, and that is something that we also can like relate to when we are commentating, and that the viewers also will sort of feel. uh, so yeah, it's important to be at some races every year. And of course, being a small country with a small Formula One market, we don't have the budget to go to all races. But as soon as the pandemic is over, we will start to go to some races again. And if we are lucky, and if Dennis Hauger, the Formula 3 champion, will become Norway's first Formula 1 driver, then we will start to travel to most races.
Actually, you pointed out something so interesting. I was just going to ask you about the Formula One appetite in Norway. About, of course, you mentioned that the talent is certainly quite there, but there's no one been pushing the ceiling until now. That is, how are things changing with Dennis doing so well in Formula Three? Recently, by the way, folks, he just won the Formula Three championship. He's graduating up into F2. Then the hunger is certainly getting in there, right? And do you see it reflecting in the country's sporting fan base, which is a bit interesting because Norway has so many other sports. F1 is not like number three or even number two for that matter. There's just so many others to choose from.
Yeah, that's correct. Norway is a great sporting nation. We are to brag a bit. We are very good compared to the that we are so few people. But traditionally, we are of course best at winter sports, and it has been a few race car drivers trying to get to Formula One. We had one driver in Formula 3000. We had one driver in GP2. But none who was really up there to have this chance to drive Formula One. But then Dennis Hauger comes, and he is, in my opinion, he is the best driver of his generation. He is so incredibly good. And you could see that this year, where he won the Formula 3 championship, and he basically controlled the championship from day one. And now it's not official, but everything points to him doing Formula 2 this year. And if he could do as well in Formula 2 as he did in Formula 3, I think he will be Norway's first Formula 1 driver. And of course, he's a Red Bull junior. And that's a good place to be because Red Bull has two teams in Formula One. So I think the chances for him are good if he succeeds in Formula 2. And we also see that this gains a lot of interest in Norway. Of course, we have Netflix, and then we have Dennis Hauger. It's like what you can call the perfect storm, sort of. Everything clicks and fits together these days. So the interest has never ever been like it is today in Norway. And I think that if Dennis Hauger reaches Formula One, he will become Norway's most popular athlete. I think.
And now I've got to ask you two questions, Atle. Now, firstly, about Dennis. What is it? I mean, you've seen so many Formula One drivers, you've seen so many really great racing drivers across the championships that you've competed in. What is something about Dennis that just makes him ready for the top level, according to you? And the second one, of course, would be more on the Norwegian Formula One side of things, but I'll get back to that once we're done with this one.
Dennis is mentally very strong. He very seldom does mistakes, almost never. And he has this racecraft, which is amazing. You could see in some of the Formula 3 races last year where he went from 12th to win the race without crashing. And also in rain, he is a rain master, and that's always a good sign for race car drivers. He had some overtakes in the rain. One in Hungary, for example, in turn 2 on the outside.
Hmm.
Yeah, he stands out. Of course, it's a lot of good race car drivers, and everyone in like Formula 3 and Formula 2, they are very, very good, but a few of them stands out. And Dennis, he really, really stands out.
Hmm. And with Dennis and with Netflix, you mentioned you call it a perfect storm. But do you feel the storm just carrying more people around right now? And what does it feel like from your position, being essentially the voice of Formula One in Norway?
Yeah, it's amazing. Of course, having been doing this job for 25 years as a like a quite a niche sport. Today, when I go to the grocery store,
Uh huh.
people stop me and want to talk about Formula One.
Oh.
Every day, I get a phone call from the media one time a day at least to give quotes about Formula One. Um, yeah, it's crazy. I had never imagined how this interest was going to explode in the way that it has done. So it's extremely fun and rewarding to be able to experience this now after so many years. And yeah, that's the perfect storm because of Netflix and Dennis Hauger. And I think it also will continue. I don't think this will be like just a couple of years with this high interest.
Hmm.
I think this will actually stay. And I also have to say another thing that's I want to thank Liberty Media actually, because
Ah.
Liberty Media, I think they have done so much good for Formula One to generate a bigger interest, and the plans for the future. The cars coming this years are very, very exciting, and the plans for the new e-fuel, for example.
Hmm.
And it's a lot of interesting things happening the next years, which I think will just keep the interest still growing.
Along with budget caps and sliding scale
Yep.
aerodynamics, it's all heading towards, let's say, more equal world of Formula
Yep.
One. But just a word on the whole saga with Dennis and how it could actually become even bigger. Do you think there's room for a race over here in Norway once, of course, Dennis gets to Formula One? Because it's been one thing that's been confusing me for so long, that why do Scandinavian countries don't quite have a lot of Formula One races? They used to in the past,
Yep.
but now maybe this could be the perfect chance with someone like Dennis coming in.
To be honest, no,
Hmm.
I don't think it will ever be a race in Norway, and
Hmm.
probably never in Scandinavia again. We had the Swedish Grand Prix in the 70s
Yep.
until 1978 at the Anderstorp. And today we have one FIA Grade 1 track, the brand new Kimi Ring in Finland, which is going to host the MotoGP.
Hmm.
But the problem, or I don't think it's a problem actually, but
Yeah.
the reason that I think that it will never be a Formula One race in Scandinavia is the costs.
Hmm.
It costs so much to host a Formula One race. And in a small country like Norway, even though we are a rich country, it's not traditions to for using that much money for one single event.
Hmm.
So and it will not be possible in Norway, I think, to build a FIA Grade 1 track. So thumbs up to Finland, who has made it. I don't think that will happen in Norway. So no, I don't think we will have a race here. I remember they talked about the street race in Copenhagen a couple of years ago,
Yep.
but I don't think that was really realistic. Um, I think the realistic race to host in one of the Scandinavian countries as an international big race these days is Formula E. We are, of course, we are a country filled with electric cars.
Yeah.
We are very into the EVs. So maybe a Formula E race will happen one day, but I don't think a Formula One race will happen. I don't know what you think, Kunal, now living in Norway, but do you agree?
It seems like Kunal is slightly frozen. It's not because
Yeah.
of the winter, because Kunal is back here in Mumbai, so that's not a possibility. But we'll get back to him on that. But you're
Yep.
right about that. I was about to ask you that very same thing. With Norway being so much into EVs, is it translated into any interest in Formula
Recording
E?
stopped.
Normally, I mean, we tend to think that it's a part of the technology. Has it made any difference? Is there any interest for Formula E, or is it just so many other sports to choose from that this one just fades away a little bit in the background?
Yeah, it's no interest for Formula E. Of course, it's some, but not a big interest.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and hopefully Formula 2 next year, right? Considering how things are going, and that could be so spectacular. But now that we're on this topic of drivers, Atle, I have to talk to you about, let's say, more on the past of Formula 1, more on the drivers you've seen, more on the championships that you've witnessed. Any driver as such that comes up in your mind that you probably expected a little bit more from, personally? I mean, normally it could be, say, someone like JP Montoya, the first thing that comes up to mind. But who do you think could be, let's say, that big missed opportunity for Formula One in terms of someone who could have been the superstar but just didn't quite work out? Hmm. 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 Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Ah. Okay. This is going to be a
Only,
controversial one.
yeah, but Kimi is a great driver.
Hmm.
Now he is retired. He has a fantastic career, but only one world title.
Yeah.
Maybe he should have had more world titles. Um, yeah, and it's difficult to answer or to say why, but maybe he could have been working even harder.
Hmm.
And Kimi is a really fun guy. I met him. He's a good guy, but he is also he's been like he has become this legend because he is not that he is not that fond of doing interviews and talk to media and everything, and because of that he gets this status as yeah, as sort of a legend.
Yeah.
But you also have to remember that to be a Formula One driver, your job is not only to drive the car.
Yeah.
It's also to talk to the media. It's also to promote your team and you promote your sponsors, sort of. And sometimes I think that Kimi could have been better at that. Actually, to also sometimes respect that the media is there to do a job, and his job sometimes is also to maybe answer a bit more and yeah, give some more of himself, sort of. But as a driver, I think that maybe Kimi, he could have achieved more. He should have achieved more than he did, even though he had a fantastic career. But he like sort of deserves more than one title, I think.
Yeah, and realistically, in the later half of the career as well, it could have and should have been possible. But about Kimi, there's two very interesting things. Firstly, it's one thing I have to mention that Kunal told me that you actually beat Kimi in a friendly karting race once, and I've seen that video. You got that lovely Santander trophy as well. So you've got to tell us more about that. But does it frustrate you? We've always had so many guests on the media side here on the podcast, but we've never quite got the chance to ask this question. Does it get frustrating to interview Kimi at times? Because it's fun. It's fun whenever he just gives short answers. But that's from the viewer's side, no? For
Yeah.
someone trying to extract some information, let's say for the channel or for the media website, it just becomes very frustrating, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. That's a correct word to use. And so that is exactly what I'm saying. That it's fun, and a lot of fans, they like what they see. But as a journalist, it could be frustrating because you're there to do a job, and then you have to like cooperate with the drivers, sort of. And when this cooperation is not that easy, it could be frustrating. But of course, Kimi is a really good guy, but he doesn't like the interviews that much. But
Yeah.
well, that's how it is. That's how it is.
And what was the experience like beating him? I know he mustn't have been in the most competitive of moods, but you've got to talk to us about that. That must have been a crazy race.
Yeah, that's a fun story. It's of course not important at all. But the thing was that
Oh, come on. It's always fun to brag that
Kimi,
you beat Kimi.
yeah, he came to Norway. When was this? 2014, I think. On this sponsorship event with Santander
Yeah.
at the Norwegian go-kart track. And then they invited some journalists to drive a karting race against Kimi with just rental cars. And it was quite fun because they invited me. I don't think that Santander maybe at the time knew that I also was a race car driver, but anyway, I was invited, and in one of the in one of the biggest newspapers in Norway the day before, they had a story about Kimi coming to Norway, and this guy from Santander, he told the newspaper that they were going to have this go-kart race with journalists against Kimi, and that of course Kimi would win that easily. So I thought, well, let's see about that. And so I went down to this track, and it was a draw. We had a draw for the starting positions, and I was lucky. I got pole position, and Kimi was starting last. It was, I think we were like 10, 12 competitors. So then we had this race, which we knew about. We were there to do one race. Kimi, he passed everyone except me. So I won the race before Kimi, but of course I started in pole, so it was not a big deal. And we just laughed about it. But suddenly, it seemed that this was not the plan for Santander and Ferrari and everyone. So they said that we are going to have another race number 2. So, okay, we didn't know that, but okay, we can do another race. And then they pointed at me and they said that you have to start at the back together with Kimi. So Kimi and you at the back, at the row at the back. That's of course okay for me. So this time it was a real race. We had sort of the same starting position, and I took the start, and I passed everyone quite easily. And Kimi was behind me, and he passed everyone, but not me. And he couldn't catch me, and he couldn't pass me. So I also won the second race. And that was fun because that was on we were on level at that race. And it was even more fun afterwards, actually, because Kimi was, of course, all fine about it. It was the world's least important race for me as well. It was a rental kart race, nothing to brag about, really. But so we just laughed about it. It was fun. I got a prize for it. And another thing, it was a guy who knew Kimi from before he came. I can tell you who it was. Actually, his manager, Harald Huisman, who was his manager for some years ago, and who is Dennis Hauger's manager today. So Kimi and Harald, they were talking, and Harald pointed at me, and he said to Kimi, "But you know, this guy, he weighs like 65 kilos, so it's no wonder that he won." And afterwards, I went to Ferrari.com and found Kimi's bio, and it said weight 65 kilos for Kimi also. So yeah, we were quite level. But the fun thing was that a few hours later that evening, someone called me and they said that I had to go to Ferrari.com actually to read a report about Kimi's visit to Norway. They had written an article about him being in Norway and what he did there. And then they also wrote in this article at Ferrari.com that they had a go-kart race with Kimi against journalists, and that Kimi won the race easily. And I was, well, what's this? He didn't he didn't win this race. And the strange thing is that this article was like they sent it out as a press release, so it was even in Gazzetto dello Sport, one of the biggest sporting newspapers in Italy. So I tweeted, and I made a tweet, and I wrote that, "Hey Ferrari, what's this? This is not correct. I won the race." And this spread all over, and a few hours later they had changed the text, and now it stood that Kimi did a race against journalists. He started from behind, and he finished second, and nothing more. And it didn't say that the winner, he also started from behind, and that was me.
It would have been so much of good press, right? I've been seeing your name accompanying that, but that's what Ferrari tends to do often. Just silence things that don't quite work out with their own narrative.
Usually. I don't know. It seems like they had written the text in front, so the text was ready. I was, to be honest, very, very surprised that they wrote about a rental kart race. That was very surprising for me, but they did, and probably the text had been written before the race, and they expected Kimi to win, but he didn't.
And Atle, did you even tell them, or at the very end, when did you actually tell them that you're a racing driver and this is no fluke at all? And what was the reaction like?
No, I think when I came, it was some people there knowing me, so they knew that I had some experience. It was a fun experience. It's a good story. Most of all, that's what it is. It's a fun, good story. I also know that Kimi, he remembers this himself. A few years later, someone reminded him, and he remembered it. It's a good story. And as I said earlier, Kimi is a good guy. I hope more for him I hope more for him his career, but I think he is very satisfied himself, of course. And I think he should have been a bit more helpful with the media sometimes, but that's how he is, and I respect that. But for me and the Kimi story, it's just a fun story. It was a really fun experience. But I have won some other races which are more important for me.
Exactly. And so many of them in the VLA and so many in the Norwegian National Championships as well. But getting on the whole Kimi point, right? With Kimi, it's very interesting that Liberty Media have got him to become this cool legend, and they've matched up his perception that way in the media. And I think you mentioned about how good Liberty Media has been in terms of making Formula One better. Anything that you think is still missing though? Because I think Kunal told me that you and him had a really fun chat about Wednesday evening races and maybe that prospect that could potentially happen. How do you look at it that way?
Yeah, that's interesting. I have to like talk about this from a Norwegian perspective. I don't know how it is in other countries, but when I grew up, my dad was watching Formula One races on Sundays, and that was no problem. If you want to watch a Formula One race on Sunday, you do watch a Formula One race on Sunday. Today, when I talk to my friends with small kids, they say, I would really like to watch the Formula One race on Sunday, but I can't because I have to. It's family time. It's a day off.
Yeah.
We are going to the woods, or we are going to the beach, or we are going skiing, or whatever. And so that's why I think it's quite strange that Formula One doesn't try or discuss at least to have midweek races. Because I think if you had a Formula One race Wednesday night, it would be, you would have much more viewers on TV. And you can compare that to Champions League football.
Yeah.
They are playing midweek, and it's a huge success. Because Sunday at 3:00, many families, and I guess it's like this in other countries as well, it's family time. It's not the time where you're supposed to sit in front of the TV. But Wednesday night at 8:00, the kids are in bed, and you can watch TV. So yeah, Kunal and I have been talking about that. And I don't know, Kunal, if you agree with me, but I think that would be a good idea for Formula One.
Absolutely, I think it's a great idea to pursue because at the end of the day, Formula One is also running out of Sundays to host races on. So maybe putting it on a Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yeah. But on a more serious note, a lot of other global sports have taken up the weekday evening slots. So maybe there is merit in Formula One to also go down a route and see how it goes. And then, of course, this is where everyone listening in will be like, yeah, but there's a Grand Prix weekend format. When will they do practice? And when will they have qualifying? But, from where Atle and I have been doing this for several years, of course, Atle has done it 5 times more than I have. If they want to actually do it on a Wednesday evening or any other weekday evening or something, they can work the entire schedule around that. So I would definitely upvote the idea along with a lot of other news and tweets of Atle's that go viral on Reddit. I would definitely upvote this idea.
But actually, on a more serious note, right, it realistically can potentially be tried out because Asian races, that's in a way, that would be a bit closer because it's trying to match up to the European timing. But if you just keep it as a standalone thing, if you try to make sure that it's Wednesday evening for, let's say, Europe, where today, of course, there's most of the Formula One market existing, there could be a chance because, as you guys mentioned, football has done it. And it's not like Formula One is a radically different product in terms of the viewing experience, right? It's, again, a similar 2-hour sit down and relax sort of experience that football offers you. So there is a chance. And do you think Liberty Media will be bold enough to try it, Atle? Because they've tried things like sprint. They are
Yeah.
known to be a bit more aggressive on that front. But do you reckon it'll ever happen? And what about the other traditionalists? Have they approached you about this as well and had a few harsh words?
Yeah, if someone are willing to try it, it's Liberty Media probably.
Hmm.
We see today that the races where we have most viewers, that's the North American races because
Hmm.
they go late Sunday evening. So yeah, I think Liberty maybe are willing to try something like this. Um, it could be some other challenges as well, of course. For the spectators, it's much better for with a weekend race, of course, when you have the day off to go to the races. But with the big interest of Formula One these days, I think you could probably fill the stands also at the Wednesday at
Yeah.
most of the tracks. And then, of course, you need to have the whole organization. And we have to remember that even though Formula One is a very professional sport, they are dependent of marshals
Yeah.
that do this in their off time, actually. So that could be a challenge when you need several hundreds of marshals at the racetrack. That's not that easy on a Tuesday and a Wednesday, then on a Saturday and a Sunday. But I think if you really want to try it, it's possible.
And it doesn't have to be for all the races, right? It can
No,
be
no.
once or twice. So it just makes it worth it, like the sprint essentially. Plan
Yep.
beforehand and try it. And it's interesting that we've touched up upon this because this just means that there's so many ideas flying around that we wouldn't even be suggesting it if Bernie would be owning the sport. So
No.
there's that. But how do you see things evolving with Liberty, Atle? Because they're bold and they're trying stuff. They're trying to equalize the whole game. They're trying to bring in Netflix. This is just turning out to be a dream essentially for all of us.
Yeah, I am so impressed over what Liberty is doing. I think they are doing the right things. A lot of the things that I missed some years ago
Hmm.
when I was thinking about Formula One, which I really love. I that's my passion. Formula One has been my life since I was at my first race as an 8-year-old at Paul Ricard in '88. But
You were there? Oh
yeah, yeah,
my.
I was. I can tell you that story also.
For sure.
Let me do that. Let me do that afterwards. But that's a
Definitely, yeah.
fun. That's actually also a fun story. But yeah, Formula One is my life, and it's my passion. I really like Formula One. But there has been aspects of Formula One which I have been thinking could have been better.
Hmm.
Uh, and which I was missing. And then Liberty Media comes in, and I think they are doing so much good. Netflix is one thing, social media is another thing. They experiment things. They had this. If you remember the race at Bahrain at the outer circuit at
Yep.
Bahrain last year. I don't think that would have been happening in the old days, but now they dare to do things like that. And of course, the new cars coming in, it's really good. I want cars that are more raceable, with more ground effect and smaller, or the wings are not smaller, but they are not that effective. I think the racing will be better. I think the product will be better. I think the interest will just rise with the new cars. So yeah, I think Liberty Media is doing very good things. And then of course we can still discuss some of the countries that Formula One travels to,
Yeah.
with when you talk about human rights and everything. That's something which is important to address and to have focus on. And of course, we have the final few laps of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, which you also can discuss. When you have this sort of, you have the sporting side and you have the entertainment side, and what really happened in those few last laps. That's something which is very interesting to discuss. But as a whole, I would say that Liberty Media has been so good for Formula One. And if I have 2 more minutes, I will tell you about my first Formula One race, because I was 8 years old and I was with my family at a vacation in France, and we were going to Paul Ricard for the French Grand Prix in '88. And we had the cheapest tickets at the end of the Mistral Strait. And I was 8 years old and like 1 meter high or something. So when I came there, I couldn't see one thing. I didn't see the track. I didn't see the cars. I didn't see anything, because everyone was standing around. And then my father, he sees this white van standing there, and with some people on the roof of this van. And he points at me and he points at them, and he says that we have come all the way from Norway to watch this race, but my son, he's so short, he can't see anything. So the guys at the top of at the roof of the van, they said, just send him up. My brother is working with oil in Norway, he said, so just send him up. So I climbed up this up to the roof of this van, and when I entered the roof, Alain Prost passed Ayrton Senna at the end of the Mistral Strait. And I got addicted to Formula One.
What an introduction to the sport, right? That is quite something. Oof. And those cars, the sound, it already must have been just aligning towards the sport's favor at the very beginning. There's no way you can't leave that place without being a Formula One fan, can you?
No, it was amazing. Fantastic experience. And 3 years later, we went to vacation in Great Britain, and we went to the British Grand Prix at Silverstone in '91. And we had good tickets that time, so we were sitting in the woodcut corner. But a few laps before the end, my father said, I think we should go, because the lanes, the car lanes out of it will be completely chaotic. So we went like 2 laps before the end. And Nigel Mansell won that race, and Ayrton Senna, he ran out of fuel. So he had to hitchhike with Mansell, and that's a really famous picture, but I didn't see it, because then we were going out of the track.
Oh man. Oh, that's a big miss. What could have been? That would have been some sight. But also, in terms of all the cars, I mean, you've witnessed so many of them, right? Back in the 80s as well. You've witnessed, of course, the more present cars as well, as you rightly mentioned. Which one, according to you, was just the best from a raw racing perspective? For me personally, that's 2007-08. I mean, those cars, they just were fantastic. But which one do you think just strikes that nerve emotionally? Was it the 88 ones?
The 88 and the early 90s, I really liked the look of the cars before you got all the small wings and the barge boards and everything. They looked cleaner, and that's also why I'm really looking forward to this year's cars, but because they remind me somehow of this generation. I'm a pure racer. I'm more into racing than technology. So for me, I like that when the cars are a bit simpler, it's more up to the driver than up to the engineers. That generation, late 80s, early 90s. But I also liked the cars between like 2009 and 2016. They didn't look that good. I have to admit, I didn't like the look of them, but I liked the racing. I think the racing was quite good. And even though the cars that were introduced in 2017, they looked spectacular. I think that was a wrong direction to go with the big downforce cars. Yes, they were faster, and yes, we have had now a couple of seasons with great racing. But I think that maybe because of other things happening, we had like 2017, 2018 was not that good, I think, because the cars are so complex these days, and it's so difficult to be close out on the track. So I have to say that the regulation changes that we now have with this year's cars are one of the biggest in Formula One history. And in my opinion, it's also maybe or hopefully, I have to say, hopefully the smartest regulation change ever in Formula One.
Actually, just picking up this point for a minute, Atle, the cars are still slightly longer. Do you think that makes it a bit of an issue that the cars are still quite wide and still quite long? I mean, theoretically, they can follow better now. That's what the research and approaches say. But do you think that they should be made smaller, perhaps?
Yeah.
Or how do you look at it that way?
Yeah, because if you compare to the 80s, 90s cars, especially, the cars today are much bigger. But most tracks are not that much bigger. The tracks are quite like Monaco is not bigger than it was in '88. So of course, with a bigger car on the same track, it's more difficult also with overtaking and good racing. So yeah, I would have liked to see smaller cars. But let's see now how the new cars will work out. If they will work out as we hope and as they are designed to do, I think it will be very, very good.
Okay, now Atle, before we go, I just have to ask you one more question, and this probably has to be the one that I was holding up for so long because it's probably going to be the most interesting one, at least from my perspective. But there's something on your website. There's something really interesting where you've mentioned that you collect racetracks like people collect stamps, and I absolutely love it. 135 racetracks that you've been to, and that was in 2019, by the way. So hopefully that's added up. But 50 that you've raced on, including the Nordschleife, where you've won so many times. Which one is the best out of those 135 that you visited, Atle? And how did it come about that you've gotten such a diverse experience, and that's across countries? And from what I noticed, only a couple of them are in Norway. Most of them are across the world.
Thank you for this question. It's one thing is very easy. What is the greatest track on this planet? And that is the Nürburgring Nordschleife. It's nothing compares to that. And as I said to Kunal the other day, I just laugh when other people suggest other tracks than the Nordschleife when they talk about the best racetrack in the world, because that's the Nordschleife, period. You can't discuss that. That's the mother of all racetracks. But of course, there are also a lot of other very nice and good racetracks around the world. For me, I have this special interest in tracks and in track design, circuit design. I use a lot of time studying racetracks, and when I see a new drawing of a new racetrack, I can pretty much say if it will be a good track or a bad track. And I also have an interest in traveling. I like to travel, to visit new countries and to travel together with my family. So when we are traveling, I try to visit racetracks where I am, and I normally then contact the management of this circuit before I go there and ask if it's possible to have a few laps with my rental car or whatever. And most often they say yes. So that's how I collect racetracks these days, because as I said earlier, the last 15 years, I have mostly driven races at only one track, and that's on the Nürburgring. Before I traveled more to race in the US and around Europe, but today I try to visit new tracks wherever I am when I'm traveling. So yeah, I've been driving now on 50 tracks, and that's my collection, not stamps, but racetracks.
Oh man, I wish they had stamps when you visited a racetrack.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
had this for Formula E in Hong Kong, where they just gave us a small layout of the track and something, but that would have been so cool. But you mentioned something so interesting over there. You said that you can tell looking at a layout if it's going to be good or not. Now,
Yeah.
this is going to be a perfect, exciting note to end on. Miami, it's coming up. It's the most exciting one for 2022. Is it a good circuit or not? And what actually makes for a good circuit when you just understand from looking at the layout?
Yeah. To take your second question first, the thing is, with racetracks is that it's a difference between a circuit that is good for the driver and a circuit that is good for the spectator or the TV viewer. That could be two completely different things. A circuit that is good for a driver is a fast flowing circuit. The best race tracks on the planet, I think, is in North America.
Agreed.
You have of course, the Nordschleife in Germany, and you have Spa in Belgium, and you have Bathurst in Australia, etc. But if you look like all over, you have the old style tracks in US with like Road America, you have Road Atlanta, Mid Ohio, Lime Rock, Virginia.
VIR.
Yeah, very very good tracks. I guess you with your iRacing, you have done a lot of them. They are so fun because they are fast, they are flowing, they have elevation changes. They don't have the big runoff with tarmac, but you have grass and gravel. So they are fun. But if you could imagine a Formula One race at the Nordschleife, it would probably not be fun to watch because they wouldn't be able to overtake each other. So that's why you can have a Formula One track. The most important thing with a Formula One track is not that the drivers are going to like it, but that the spectators and the TV viewers are going to like it. So that's the most important thing when you design a Formula One track today, I think. And of course, the best thing is when you have the combination. It's a track that the drivers really, really like, and also the spectators. About the track in Miami, I'm personally not a big fan of what you can call the parking lot racetracks. And I think it's a shame that the original idea in Miami was to have a race downtown, where we have had races before. You have had IndyCar or kart races there. You have had IMSA races. If you watch some old episodes of Miami Vice, you can see some IMSA races from downtown Miami by the sea. That would have been the most spectacular. Also, Formula E actually had a race there. So that would have been very spectacular, like a Monaco feeling, sort of. But because of some protests and everything, they couldn't have the race there, so they had to move it up to the stadium. I'm sure that the track itself will be good, and it will be good for the show, but the surroundings will not be that spectacular, I think.
That's going to be interesting, and there's only one way to find out. It's going to come up in a couple of months, so that's going to be lucky for us that we're able to find out. But Atle, seriously, this was such a fun episode. It's been around an hour and 10 minutes, and I don't even know how that's gone past. So thank you so much for having for coming on and joining us for this episode. Really, what a pleasure. What a
Thank you so
pleasure.
much for having me, Somil and Kunal. And good luck with your iRacing commentating, which I hear that you're doing, Somil. And Kunal, you have to come back to Norway soon, because we need to prepare for the new Formula One season, and we need your good job there, so we are ready for another season.
And I think you're muted, Kunal. Now that's what happens usually. Just a moment.
I'm glad I did that only towards the end of the episode. But yes, absolutely. I'm gonna be back pretty soon, and we'll start preparing soon enough for yet another fun season. But I must say, I had the best seat in the house, listening to all the stories. Even though I've heard some of them, the depth with which Atle could, describe them this time was fantastic. So I'm pretty certain all our listeners are going to love them. And this is going to be one of those collector's editions, when Atle does his 40th season and 50th season, saying, hey, guess what? You need to go and hear how this all started 26 years ago. So thank you so much, Atle. It's a delight to be doing what I get to do with you, and even more so to have you on our podcast.
Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to having you back home in Norway, Kunal.
Absolutely.
And folks, thank you so much for listening to this episode as well. If you liked what we went on about today, don't forget to leave a good rating. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, and just share this with your friends and family members who enjoy the world of Formula One, or maybe few that are actually starting to get interested in it, so that maybe they can come on. And we usually have a lot of race reviews and race previews over here, but in the off season we tend to bring out interesting stories like the one we had with Atle here today. So folks, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. See you in a little bit. Bye bye.